So there are a couple new interesting and exciting Nintendo Switch 2 reports floating around online, especially if you care about, one, what this console will be named, because it does indeed seem like we now know the name of Nintendo's next-gen hardware, and two, if you care about how it's going to perform from a sales perspective, as there are definitely differing opinions online around this, because many people think that maybe Nintendo might go down that terrible Wii U path once again and have a very successful console with the Switch, but not be able to follow it up with a sequel console. And I think the naming actually ties into the sales conversation, at least slightly, when discussing these new pieces of information. And I think we're gonna have yet another very successful Nintendo generation to look forward to when it comes to console hardware and the software attached with it. And that is now being backed up by a massive analyst firm that is expecting the same thing. So we're gonna get on the same page with all of this info. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I wanna first discuss why we probably likely now know the name of Nintendo's next-gen console, and yes, it will just be called Nintendo Switch 2. Now, there are a couple different stories that this ties into floating around out there, so you may remember there's this mysterious Reddit user that we discussed on the channel that provided proof pictures to initially just a Reddit mod, and I was very skeptical at that point in time on maybe the user actually having legit information about a finalized retail unit that they supposedly got to hold in their hands for Nintendo's next-gen hardware. Well, the mod was convinced. I wasn't necessarily as convinced, but then we saw a name like Tom Warren in The Verge and a writer over there actually look at the exact proof firsthand themselves, and they were largely convinced that it was legit information. Some of the pictures it seems like they saw were maybe ones that the mods hadn't even seen, and just basically came to the conclusion that it would have been too hard to fake. And so they do believe that they were looking at real pictures of the console hardware, and one of the claims is that this thing just has a straight up Nintendo Switch 2 logo whenever you're looking at it on the dock or anything like that, or on the back of the console, like we've heard from previous leaks before. And based off of how the logo was being described, Necrofelipe did have this image going around over on Twitter, which is his best attempt to essentially get an accurate looking logo based off all the information that's being provided, where you have the Switch logo itself, a 2 directly next to it, and then Nintendo Switch underneath that, which does actually just look like the logical way that you would put that logo together, and I do like the way it looks personally. Well then, Necrofelipe posted to the internet that cell phone notifying me that Pioro liked this tweet, and you have our notorious leaker friend Pioro, who has accurately put out information of numerous first-party Nintendo titles. There was some interesting stuff happening with their history because, you know, they talked to a journalist about their source. The journalist was not off the record with them, and they put out what they said publicly, and that definitely caused probably Pioro to be in the crosshairs for a while. They privated their account. You can't follow them if you're like a new follower, but essentially if you were following them before, they still have an account, and they've come back to leak different information. Most recently with that Sonic Racing tease before it was revealed at the Game Awards, they were able to go ahead and post that up ahead of time. And this is still somebody who's largely believed to either be a source that's working at Nintendo or has a source that works at Nintendo that at least has access to things like the back-end Nintendo website eShop pages, because that's how we found out they were getting a lot of their Nintendo Direct leaks. And when Nintendo didn't create those eShop pages at the June Direct last year for games like Echoes of Wisdom, Mario and Luigi Brothership, and some others, Pioro didn't know that those games would be at that presentation, so he was basically saying, hey, temper your expectations, this is a lighter Direct. Well, it didn't end up being a light Direct, but Nintendo rather knew how to avoid Pioro from leaking their information accurately. Well, anyway, you see the reply with nice logo with some eyes, or the smiley face monocle, closer look type of emoji. So Pioro is not one to just go back and forth online and just reply to things for fun. I mean, everything that he's basically liked in the past ends up being a tease to something being right if somebody guessed what he is teasing in his comments. While some of his posts are more cryptic than others, it's everything that he does post-wise is related to some kind of piece of information that he has or something that he is teasing. So the conclusion is that this nice logo comment from Pioro actually does indicate that yes, Nintendo Switch 2 is the name, and that the logo is probably very close to what the actual finalized logo will be for Nintendo's next-gen hardware when we see it hit store shelves. And that is something that, you know, while I would love the name Super Nintendo Switch just for nostalgia reasons, because I grew up as an SNES kid, it was the first Nintendo console I ever actually owned, and I would love to see that naming convention come back. I do think that for simplicity's sake and just for the ease of communication to your average video game tech user out there who is going to be a target audience for this console, everybody understands what the number 2 means when you are following up a new generation of consoles. So if they had the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2 comes out, they know it's not just some kind of mid-generation refresh or just kind of a new accessory like the Wii U got misconstrued into for its marketing campaign, where people couldn't tell, like your average consumer didn't necessarily know that it was the next generation console. They thought maybe it's just that tablet accessory you can buy for the Wii, because they're still playing with Wiimotes on the TV commercials and stuff like that. It just looks like now they have this tablet accessory. And if you don't know much about graphical fidelity and things, and the games all being in HD now, you might just think that that's legitimately an accessory add-on. And Nintendo, after 8 years, plus of the Switch being its primary flagship hardware, is going to want to make it very clear that this is still a Switch, because that is the function of the console. And if you think back to the naming convention of the DS and 3DS, a similar thing there. DS, very successful console. It has dual screens, so the name DS did stick to the next generation version of that hardware. They went with 3DS, a play on words, because glasses-free 3D was the big gimmick for that console hardware when it was launched. So Nintendo has technically done something similar to this before, but it's also very not Nintendo-like at the same time, because they often like to reinvent the wheel, if you will, or have some kind of crazy new idea that's going to market the hardware, and they name their console something in accordance with whatever that big gimmick or feature is of their next console hardware. This time around, it seems like Nintendo Switch 2 is the name choice, and I think if you look at Furukawa and how he is more of a numbers guy and plays it very safe whenever it comes to the growth and the direction and the success of Nintendo and all that stuff, it seems like they're less in the era of taking wild chances when they have something successful, and rather, since this console will still Switch as its primary console function, it's going to be Switch 2, which then ties us into this interesting analyst report from a very big financial firm, essentially giving us some forecasted numbers, not from Nintendo, mind you, but rather one of the largest analyst firms that, it's more for investors and things like that they want to know where to put their money, what companies are poised to do very well in the future. And they were doing a analysis of the gaming market. It actually is interesting for Microsoft and Sony, because they are predicting, and I think you can clearly say like Sony's probably going to be the winner out of this, but that there will be room for essentially one non-Nintendo console in the next hardware generation, and Nintendo will actually continue to gain market share at a very large volume. And to get on the same page with all of those exact details, let's quickly hop over to Go Nintendo, where they do have a good write-up on what's being forecasted here. Nintendo stock hits new all-time high. Analyst predicts Switch 2 to be the clear winner of next gen. It's good to be the king. Nintendo has had a couple of eras where they reigned supreme on the stock market. The first was during the Wii and DS era, where Nintendo hit levels of popularity and success that the company had never seen before. The second wave of all-time high came about during the Switch era, which pushed Nintendo even higher. Now, as we're making our way out of the Switch era and into something new, Nintendo has seen their stocks climb once again. Nintendo has once again seen their stock climb higher than ever before, hitting a new height of $62 US. This hype for the Big N is due to two major reasons, with one being the excitement for the official reveal and the release of Switch 2, and the second being tied to a recent proposal to adjust Japanese taxes that could increase spending power for the 19 to 22 age range. Turns out more than investors are hyped about Nintendo as well, with analysts predicting big things in Nintendo's future as well. The Switch has been an incredible success for Nintendo thus far, and those in the industry who keep a close watch on the markets are seeing all signs pointing to similar gains for Switch 2. Research and consulting firm DFC Intelligence has crunched the numbers, and they say Switch 2 will be the clear winner of the next console generation. Here's all the most pertinent points DFC shared in their report. Switch 2 is projected to sell between 15 to 17 million units in 2025. Switch 2 is likely to reach 80 million units sold by 2028. Sony and Microsoft predicted to release new systems by 2028, but only one will be successful. The company that fails to gain momentum will struggle mightily against Switch 2. So obviously it's just an analyst and a report at the end of the day. It is one of the larger firms that does these kinds of analysis on the market. But that being said, we don't know what will ultimately happen until we see Nintendo's marketing strategy for this console, the software lineup, and things like that that will actually move units. But just the overall brand success of Nintendo right now with Switch and what this company or firm can see as far as the trajectory that they are headed in, they believe that 80 million units by 2028 for Switch 2 is entirely possible. And that should mean some very good things to come from a software perspective with the games that we can expect. And obviously Nintendo is branching out in different directions than they ever have before, with getting into movies at a mainstream scale. Obviously we have the theme parks and all types of different pieces of merchandise. Like, they are definitely a booming brand, and I don't think that you should forecast them falling off a cliff by any stretch of the imagination, especially if they are going with something that is a very safe play, which is yet another hybrid form factor console that will no doubt be significantly more powerful. And they have that Switch branding that is highly successful and known amongst the average consumer today, and they're going to have the follow-up to that with Nintendo Switch 2. So let me know in the comments down below what you make of both of these different stories, and if you're happy with a name like Switch 2, or if you think Nintendo should have gone in a different direction. Are you still thinking there's a high likelihood that maybe the name is not Switch 2 and the leaker known as Puero has it wrong, and maybe that Reddit user has no valid source of information and just duped everybody online? And when it comes to this market analyst report, how are you feeling the Switch 2 is going to do out of the gate? Is 15 to 17 million units in the first year realistic in your mind? Do you think that something like 80 million units of the next gen hardware is possible by a year like 2028? And do you think Nintendo actually goes further than where they're at with the Switch 1 this time around, or will it just kind of come close and maybe not sell quite as much over the long-term life cycle of Nintendo's next-gen console? But make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.